Forget the cozy frontier inn you have seen in every Western film. The real frontier hotel in the 1880s smelled like unwashed bodies, rotting straw, and the particular sourness of a mattress that had not been changed since the previous administration. The warm lamplight, the private room, the feather bed waiting at the end of a long ride. That image was invented, and you paid for it. Good money, $1, sometimes $2 a night. In a decade when a cowboy earned $30 a month. You handed over the cash. You signed the register. And what you got in return was a cloth sack stuffed with straw, 4 to 6 inches of it, soaked through with the sweat of every man who had slept there before you and every creature that had come with them. This is what frontier hotels actually were, not the myth, the record. And the record is considerably worse than what the movies were willing to show you. To understand the frontier hotel, you have to understand what a boomtown in the 1880s actually was. Towns like Deadwood, South Dakota, and Cheyenne, Wyoming, and Dodge City, Kansas, were not built for comfort. They were built for speed, for the extraction of whatever resource had drawn 10,000 people to a patch of land that had been empty grassland the decade before. Hotels went up in weeks. Walls were single-thickness planks with gaps between them. Roofs leaked. Windows had no glass, only shutters. In Dodge City in the 1880s, the only bathhouse in town charged 25 cents a session and served hundreds of men a week from a single tub changed a few times a day at most. A cowboy arriving off the Chisholm Trail after 60 or 70 days without bathing would wait in line for that water. It was not clean, but it was water, and in a town built in weeks on open grassland that passed for sanitation infrastructure. What hotels offered was not comfort, it was a roof, a surface to lie on, and the theoretical concept of a bed. The mattress itself deserves a moment of consideration. Frontier hotel mattresses were cloth sacks, periodically refilled with straw or goose feathers. The key word is periodically. The straw was changed when the proprietor decided it needed changing, which was not often. These sacks absorbed everything: sweat, blood from wounds, the fluids of sick travelers, the oils from 100 different heads. The fabric was not washed between guests. No system for doing so existed, and in many establishments, no source of hot water that would have made it possible. You lay down on what the last man had left. The sack grew darker over the months. The smell built in layers. In Durango, Colorado, in the early 1880s, an Englishman traveling through the territory sent a telegraph to the local hotel requesting a private room. The hotel replied that they had placed him in the bridal suite. He arrived to find 18 beds arranged in the room, occupied by as many guests as those beds could hold. The staff considered this a perfectly reasonable interpretation of the word suite. That is not a joke. That is the operating standard. But the cost of sharing a bed with a stranger was not merely the indignity of it. The cost was biological. In Jerome, Arizona, a copper mining camp that ran 3 shifts a day through the 1880s, hotels near the mine rented beds by the 8-hour shift rather than by the night. 3 different men. 1 bed. No change of straw between shifts. A man coming off the night shift at 6 in the morning would find the straw still warm from the body of the man who had just risen for the day shift. The warmth was not comfort. The warmth was evidence. 3 bodies in 1 bed across every 24 hours, across the weeks of a mining season that ran for months without pause. The straw never cooled enough to matter. What I keep wondering is how a man reconciled that. lying down in warmth that was not his own, in a bed he had paid for and did not own. What you do with that? Drop it in the comments. The straw was not just uncomfortable. The straw was occupied. Here is how you knew. Travelers who were wise to the situation carried oil pans in their luggage. The technique was documented as standard travel advice. Pull the bed frame away from the wall, set each leg in a pan of oil, and wait, because bedbugs cannot swim. This was not a precaution taken by the especially cautious. This was something a person who traveled the frontier simply brought with them, the same as a bedroll or a change of boots. The fact that it was necessary is the point. Cimex lectularius, the common bedbug, is a wingless insect roughly the size of an apple seed when unfed. It feeds exclusively on blood, emerges at night, and can survive for over a year without a meal. It lays its eggs in the creases of fabric and in the hollow shafts of dry grass. At body temperature, a bedbug egg hatches in 6 to 10 days. A single female produces 2 to 5 eggs per day. The math of a straw mattress that has not been changed in a season is not small. Frontier settlers were well acquainted with bedbugs. They appear in diaries, in letters, in newspaper accounts. The Omaha Daily Bee published a poem about them in February of 1891, describing the author rising from his bed to fight them and uttering, as the poem put it, many a sad lament over their stinging bites. The poem was printed because the editors knew every reader would recognize exactly what it described. This was not an exotic complaint. This was Tuesday. And then there were the lice, body lice, pediculus humanus corporis, live in clothing rather than hair, moving to the skin only to feed. A man who had been on a cattle drive for 60 days without bathing brought whatever was living in his shirt and his bedroll into the room with him, into the shared straw, and into the clothing of whoever slept there next. Body lice transmitted relapsing fever, a bacterial infection producing cycles of high fever and delirium that recurred every week or so. Most cases in otherwise healthy adults were not fatal. But the frontier was not full of otherwise healthy adults. It was full of men eating salt pork and dried beans for months, with no access to medical care, who could not afford to spend a week delirious in a straw-filled room and still make the next cattle drive. Isabella Bird knew about frontier hotel beds before she lay down in one. She was 41 years old, English-born, a naturalist and writer who had traveled alone through Hawaii before arriving in Colorado in the autumn of 1873. She documented her journey in letters published in 1879 as A Lady's Life in the Rocky Mountains, and those letters are specific about what she found. At a rooming house in Greeley, Colorado, in September of 1873, Bird was given a room with canvas partitions so thin that every sound from adjacent spaces passed through. She described it as thick with black flies. She lay down on the bed. The insects found her within minutes, and staying in the bed became impossible. She rose. She sat in a chair. She remained there until morning. She did not describe what she felt in the bed. She described what she did after. That is the whole document. She sat in the chair. She did not go back. Now it is 1883. It is late October. You have been on the trail for 78 days. You are in Dodge City, Kansas, at the end of a cattle drive. You have $30 coming to you. You walk into the hotel on the main street, the best one in town, and you pay $1.50 for a room. You have not slept under a roof since August. You open the door. The room is small. The walls are bare planks. There is a hook for your coat and a basin on a stand and a bed with a cloth sack on it. You do not inspect the sack. You're too tired to inspect the sack. You lie down. The straw moves under you. Not from the settling of your weight. Something else moves in the straw. You're too tired to address this. You have not slept in a real bed in 78 days. You close your eyes. By morning, you will have been bitten in places you cannot reach to scratch. You will not mention it to anyone. There is nothing to mention. This is the room you paid for. This is what the $1.50 bought. You stop counting. You sleep. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. There is a lot more history like this coming. It would be easy to look at this and see only squalor. Men lying down in conditions that no modern traveler would accept, paying good money for something that made them itch for the next 2 weeks. It would be easy to feel nothing but pity. Stop there. Because what is also true is that those men came off the trail and walked into those hotels voluntarily. And they did it because, after 78 days of open ground and wind and river crossings and the smell of 30,000 cattle, a straw mattress under a roof was something. It was warmth and enclosure, and the sound of other human beings through a thin plank wall. The travelers who complained were writing to people with better options. The cowboys who never complained had no frame of reference that told them they should. The men who ran those hotels built them in weeks with green lumber in towns that did not exist the decade before, and kept them running through floods and fires and busts that emptied the streets overnight. The guests came off the harshest working conditions in American history, paid their dollar, and were back on the trail in the morning. They did not need comfort. They needed a surface and a roof and a few hours where no one required anything of them. In conditions that should not have supported human sleep, they slept. We should not look at that with contempt. We should look at it with something considerably closer to awe. He pulls his coat over himself for warmth. Tonight you sleep in a bed.